madrasas, buying off generals, buying off the army, funding the Afghan resistance. The princes, the royal families in the Gulf paid for Al-Qaeda. They would meet with Al-Qaeda people at the falconry camps. I mean, this has been seen on overhead. We know it exists. You show up and you say, here is $100 million in cash. Take the money, and they're buying redemption, if you like, as a Catholic would. It's like going in and lighting a candle for them is giving this money. The entire 9/11 operation was not funded out of bin Laden's personal pocket. It was not funded by Taliban. It was funded out of the Gulf. Falconry camps are just a metaphor for the way business is done in the Middle East. If you're going to send money to bin Laden, you do not want to send it by bank transfer. All that Gulf money came through falconry camps, came in cash, fly the airplanes in, leave the cash, come home. And no, there's no proof. I mean, how hard is that? It's called money laundering.
Before September 11th, the State Department was concerned about these falconry hunting camps because they were part of a pattern of contact between the UAE, elements of the UAE, and elements of Taliban-ruled Afghanistan, including Al-Qaeda. Airplanes flew in violation of U.S. sanctions. There were other concerns about flights between the UAE and Afghanistan that might be carrying weapons or other materials to support Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. When the United States and Pakistan entered into cooperation against the Taliban, the Pakistan government disclosed to the Americans the existence of an airfield in Pakistan that was entirely dedicated to falcon hunting. It was a sort of transit point for visiting sheikhs from the Gulf to their camps, and the United States had no idea that it was there. So that's a signal of the kind of infrastructure that was associated with these camps. In the winter of 1999, the CIA encouraged a group of Afghans that were working for the agency to try to locate Osama bin Laden reliably enough so that the president could consider ordering one of these cruise missile strikes. These Afghan agents gathered information that Osama bin Laden was going to attend a falcon hunting camp in the deserts south of Kandahar that had been arranged by guests from the United Arab Emirates. The CIA, as its first step, ordered satellites above this location and took photographs of the camp in some detail. So they showed hunting camps, they showed the C-130, the camouflage pattern on the airplane, and the tail number led the Central Intelligence Agency to conclude that it belonged to the government of the United Arab Emirates.
The host of that camp was Sheikh Hamdan bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the UAE Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was hosting Osama bin Laden in this falconry camp as a VIP guest.
You see the foreign minister's airplane there. Normally, then you sit the guy down and say, all right, who was at the camp? How was this arranged? How did you get, who was the Taliban? And the guy sits down and submits to a briefing because the man's indicted, bin Laden. Or he sits you down and says, he was never there. You get some sort of answer, but we are too afraid to go in and ask those questions because we need cheap oil and we need jobs after we leave the government.
Then in the early winter of 1999, when the CIA came up with a plan to attack a hunting camp in Afghanistan at which it felt that Osama bin Laden was present or was not present, that recommendation or that plan was ultimately aborted. Did you recommend against that plan?
Yes, Senator. What I did was to call the Director of Central Intelligence and say that I had finally been presented with satellite photography of the facility. And it was very clear to me that this looked like something other than a terrorist camp. It looked like a luxury hunting trip. And I asked him to look into it personally. When he did, he called back and he said that he was no longer recommending the attack.
But Richard Clark only referred to it as a luxury hunting camp, and he had the luxury of overhead viewing with satellites to see these camps. Yet to our government, to our people, he referred to a city, a tented city, as a luxury hunting camp, and he called off the bombing.
There had been negotiations throughout this period over a large purchase of American fighter jets from American corporations by the government of the UAE. The Counterterrorism and National Security Advisor, Richard Clark, had been involved in those negotiations.
Alan and his work and his revelations have been completely ignored. And it's not like he came and he said he saw something. He has everything documented. He has film, he has documentation, he has correspondence. He almost lost his life in Mongolia, in other places. It's not like he's coming and he's just making allegations. There is heavy documentation, yet nobody was willing to act upon it. Why not? It's money.
The people in the State Department, the National Security Council, the White House, know that when they leave the White House, that's the end of their government service, and they need money. You cannot afford to offend the Gulf Arabs because they've got the money. It's the golden rule. You has the gold, makes the rules.
Of course, the question always comes up, if bin Laden would have been taken out at that particular money camp, would there have been a 9/11? Bin Laden, of course, and his operators planned 9/11, and they planned it in Afghanistan. So perhaps if action would have been taken against the targeted information and intelligence we had of that particular money camp, of bin Laden being there, in all due respect for all the naysayers and people who look at this, could we have prevented 9/11? The fact is probably by taking out bin Laden in 1999 and many of his operatives, 9/11 may not have happened.
9/11, since 9/11, there's been no investigation of the Gulf, the financing. There's been no pressure put on Saudi Arabia, on the Emirates, or any other country to explain why they protected bin Laden and why the administration did nothing.
Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated. Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
I trusted the Bush administration was dealing with Al-Qaeda and protecting the world. I never thought it would be up to my group of people to bring bin Laden to justice. I run a wildlife conservation group. My job is to save falcons from smugglers and to stop genetic pollution. And I never dreamed that this was also my responsibility, what we've been dealing with. In order to protect falcons in Central Asia, I have to associate with some very diverse characters. And one of my team members, who is codenamed T2, was running a rat line from a border state through Iran up to Turkmenistan and Russia. T2 is a smuggler. He doesn't smuggle wildlife, but he knows how the smuggling rat lines work all through Central Asia. And T2 encountered bin Laden when bin Laden was falconry hunting in Baluchistan. 6 meetings happened. At that same time, the Bush administration was telling the world that bin Laden was living in a cave in Waziristan. And as a result of the administration's disclosure